Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to Social Convos. I'm your host Diego, together with my co-host Sean-Luc. Sean-Luc, how is your day?
It's it's insane. Today has been really insane, and it's especially insane because we're going live now while the World Cup semifinals is starting. So it's kind of a very interesting situation for me, but I feel like there's some connection between that and today's guest, to be honest.
Yeah, so World Cup's going on. It's December, busiest time of the year.
Oh yes,
And
the calendar just launched. The Surfesta
I just
calendar
saw,
just
I was
launched.
about to
Yeah.
mention that because everyone is going out again after 2 years this year. So that's going to be exciting. And that's an important part of talking about culture, about our culture, especially Oruyari, like the day before New Year's. And that's kind of one of the things that's known worldwide, right? Or like that
Yes,
Suriname is
yes.
known
We
for.
we've we've
So
gotten we've gotten recognition, top 10 recognitions multiple times for being one of the places where we celebrate well, Old Year's Eve we should call it, not New Year's Eve, but Old Year's Eve because
yeah,
we celebrate
so
during the day.
in the
So
context
with
of culture and cultivating culture, who do we have with us today?
That's why I wanted because a lot of things during the World Cup, like one of the topics right now is the team of Morocco, and Morocco is now in the semifinals of the World Cup, and there are a lot of European-born and European-raised players that play for the national team of Morocco, and are really proud of their culture, their heritage. Uh, Donate all the money that they get for playing for their national team for good causes, and culture and culturally, sports is also one of the ways to integrate. And today's guest is actually has written a children's book on integration of culture, um, which is really interesting because now I'm experiencing that as well. Of course, I have children who are Surinamese, but they're also Dutch. They live in Suriname. They experience different cultures, and sometimes I get questions from my children that even I have a hard time answering. So I find it really interesting that our guest for today, Nadia, wrote a children's book on explaining different cultures, how to integrate it, and to talk with your children about cultural diversity and different cultures. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Nadia Khan to the Social Confoes. Welcome, Nadia.
Well, thank you. Thank you, John, and thank you, Diego.
Yes, Nadia. I mean, it's a really interesting topic. We have had several topics. The past episodes have been much more on the personal development, but also mental health kind of side, which is a really important topic for us. But another topic which came about more and more is the culturally diverse world that we live in. Um, you are born and raised in the U.S. Uh, largely, right?
Not really. I actually came to the United States from Pakistan when I was 4 years old. So I
Okay.
could technically say I grew up here, but I
Raised,
didn't.
yeah.
Um, I still have memories of, you know, back in Pakistan of like, doing things that I don't think kids here these days would be doing, let's say climbing trees or waiting for a vendor to like, bring, yummy treats that you could buy from them or, just exploring the way that, kids should be exploring things. And I think that's what's missing right now with kids nowadays, and I wish they would learn more about it and explore the world versus what they're exploring on their tablets or Minecraft or Roblox or anything of that sort.
So,
So
if I may, Diego, I want to quickly jump into that because how much of that is generational differences and how much of that is cultural difference? when it comes to climbing in trees and playing outside? So for your perception, Nadia, how much of it do you feel like is a cultural thing, a difference in culture, or how much of it is generation, or it could even be the place where you grew up?
I think it's a generational thing because when I grew up in the United States, kids did spend more time outside and spending time, let's say, riding bikes with your friends outside, or playing marbles, or doing things more outside. And I think it's just a more of a generational thing, and there was less technology per se, I think, back then. And you had more time to have more interpersonal skills as a child. Let's say you would be able to go, to a playground and meet kids you've never met before, or you wouldn't see on an ongoing basis, or have a conversation with them, or be able to go to a library and just sit with complete strangers and have a conversation as a child, or do coloring or so with people that you've never seen before, or people that are not, or children that are not even in the same neighborhood as you, but at least it exposes you to other aspects and other cultures of kids that maybe one day you can be friends with, or you might have to have interaction when you're like an adult, or working in corporate world, or wherever you're working at per se.
So you just mentioned you moved to the US when you were 4, and you still had memories of from Pakistan. So yeah, if I look back, I barely have memories for 5 years and earlier. And I think I forgot who said this, but I think the age between like 0 and 7 is called the age of imprint for children. So I'm curious to know, like, how important is that, like that phase of a child's life, um, in, I guess, imprinting culture, and like how do those memories translate, or those experience translate in growing up?
Well,
Has it had an effect on you, like those memories
yeah,
from
yes,
home?
it does. So, because I remember as a kid, my parents, like, let's say my mom and other people's mothers would, on a Sunday or something, they would, oil your hair for you or so, or give your brain like a little massage or so, or give your whole body a massage or say, per se, or, wear glass like bangles, like for girls, wear like little glass bangles with sparkles on it and stuff, and or wear nice little outfits that are part of your culture, or like intricate shoes that are called kusas, I guess, and they're basically something similar to like ballet slippers, like they would have in France, but they're made with intricate designs or so. Or even when prior to, let's say, like the celebration after Ramadan for Eid, um, moms or friends or so would come together to put like henna on the hands, to put intricate designs. So all those memories helps like a child to understand that these things are blessed, and they're things to cherish, and to learn more about it, and to share it with everyone. I know when I was a kid, I didn't really appreciate um my mom putting oil in my hair, because you were afraid that if you went to school, other kids would make fun of you, and they would basically say things like, oh my God, I can take a piece of paper and you know fry an egg with all the oil on your hair. But if you look at it today, that same hair oil treatment is now like applauded, because it's seen as something that you know, helps your hair grow, makes your hair like fuller, or it helps with, de-stressing your mind if you're having uh mental health issues, or not such a great day or so. It helps you to relax and unwind. And for a child to understand where it comes from, it makes them appreciate it. I didn't appreciate it because I was afraid back then that people would laugh and not to wear bangles to class because my classmates might think that I'm, disrupting class, or it's causing them to be, not able to pay attention to things. So I kind of suppressed it when I was a kid. And I now I'm as I'm older, I've noticed that it shouldn't be. And for our generation of kids, we have to teach them that they should appreciate what they have at home and learn more about the things that are at home and not be afraid to showcase themselves to, you know, everyone, to the world, and be proud of it.
Where do
Really
you think that
interesting.
feeling of, I guess, shame or of being afraid of me being made fun of came from? Like, because now, of course, you've grown up and now looking back, you appreciate it. But how would parents be able to, I guess, teach their children to
Hold on one
not
second.
not be
Hold on.
afraid? Yeah.
What I really liked, Diego, on what you mentioned is, um, a lot of things like we're in this world now where a lot of people are going kind of against each other and against
Yeah.
each other's culture, right? It's like, yeah, this is wrong about your culture and this doesn't work, and that's also kind of suppressing the different cultural traditions. Whereas when they explain, like what Nadia mentioned with the hair, once you get explained why you do it, because it's the reason it's a tradition is because for generations it worked. And then at a certain point, you get a generation that's kind of ashamed of that tradition because of how the outside world projects to it. So I
Hmm.
find it I find it really interesting. Another interesting thing that you mentioned, Nadia, and I had to look this up because I didn't know this. So religiously, there is a very big difference between Pakistan and India
That
because
is true.
India is Hinduism, and I mean most of the Asians or the Hindu people living in Suriname are from India, and then Pakistan is Islam, and like predominantly Islam. So to what extent could you tell us a little bit about how these countries, because for like an outsider, especially an outsider, if you're in Europe or in the US, it's kind of like, oh, it's right next to each other. It's the same or at least similar. So how come or culturally, but also religiously, there's such a big difference that such a big part of Pakistan is Islam and such a big part of and it's such a small part of India is actually Islam.
Well, if you look at history per se, India and Pakistan were one. It was basically one couple. All of them lived together. So there was Hinduism, there was Christianity, um, there was Islam. Why is it calling me right now? So they all worked. There was there currently is Buddhism, but the thing is, it was broken up. If you look in history, by certain outside forces, such as the United Kingdom, and it was divided without proper knowledge and proper voices of the people of those countries. So think of it as a divorce, and the two parents basically divorced each other, and they were forced to divorce each other without proper protocols in place and proper voices to be put in. um, I have been to India and I have been to Pakistan, and there are so many similarities in food, um, in the way how they treat guests, and the way they dress, and things of that nature. They're all the same. It's just, like I said, John Luke, it's more of a political thing than anything else. If you look at people as humans, they're all exactly the same. I know that, so my husband actually is Indian, but I'm Pakistani. So it was a very shocking thing to others to see that, two enemies can actually, come together and get married and not have turmoil per se. But um, yeah, it's
Yeah,
just,
it's interesting. And I think you're right because there's a whole documentary is actually on Fox, and Diego might have shared this one with me already, but I've forgotten about it. There are whole documentaries on Indeed how it's one of them is called How the British Failed India and Pakistan. But there are a lot of documentaries. I think I saw a Fox documentary on this once. And indeed, like you mentioned, but it's for me something, and we're talking about culture as well and heritage. And there's a lot of things I didn't know about.
Well, one thing I want to that I noticed when you started explaining Nadia is the analogy you drew and the way you spoke is really simplified, and I can see from that
Mhm.
you really understand and communicate with children a lot because when you communicate with them, you need to simplify things to
Exactly.
fundamental levels. So that's the one thing I noticed immediately, and the next thing I want to touch on the to quickly glance over that part of India and Pakistan. Kind of, I learned about this by a bit about this history by watching Miss Marvel with um, Kamala Khan, because there's also from I'm not sure if you've seen it, a superhero movie from the Marvel Universe. It's a series, and her heritage basically is from I think Pakistan, and they showed a brief history of that with India. So I'm curious to know like how modern culture is doing like callbacks to things from the past, how that can play a role in teaching children about their heritage and culture. Because I
Um,
as a third party kind of learned a bit about it through like some modern form of media.
I guess the I guess the way I actually learned it is from my grandmother, and because that is the generation that, basically faced the displacement per se. I mean, there were people from that were currently in the Pakistan region who had to, leave everything behind and go off to, let's say, the other side of India. And the people who were in India had to leave everything behind and go to another land that they weren't aware of. So I think that knowledge and stories would be from, let's say, my my grandparents. So I learned it from my grandmother on how they, had to go on trains or so to, leave everything behind and go to a strange land, or, have tons of dead bodies on top of you and hoping that you don't get killed and act like you're dead so you can make it across the border to live, or leaving your whole family behind and starting over. It or siblings that have been broken up for so many years, and let's say 50, 60 years later they finally get to meet. I did see a story of um a grandfather who hadn't seen his sister for about, I think, like 50 years or so because of like the divorce per se. And it was their granddaughter that basically tracked down, thanks to, technology, her, his sister per se. And because of that, they were able to keep their stories alive, or, through journals or books per se. Um, in that sense, the only way is to bring stories alive and to make sure that your children learn about it. um and evening stories over tea, or coffee, while your kids are sitting with you, you can give them like a rundown of what your childhood was like, or what things were like between your, if you do have siblings, what it was like that way. um I did tell my kids about, we used to drink this nasty, like during the winter time. I remember my mom used to make this, like she used to take raw eggs and put it into like hot milk, and then she would make us eat that eat that with cereal on top every day. And then they would try to understand, like, why would why wouldn't Nana, why would she make you do that? And it basically, you try to explain that these are like little home remedies and stuff that they use back in South Asia to make sure that your immune system or your body is up to par with the coming winter, season that's coming, or to protect your body, and to build your immunity per se. So, little things like that, you can have a conversation with your kids so they feel some form of a connection to back home, or, whatever cultures that you might have. Another way to do it would be to involve them in whatever you're cooking. Um, you can tell them what the dishes are that you're making, and have them help you to make some of the things. I know one of my kids hates eating lentils and rice, but he gets to see the process of it, and he knows how to say the words and stuff of it. But I think that's the main thing to teach a child, is to make sure that they're involved in what they're doing. And that just builds more memories for them, so then when they get older, they can remember, with whenever they do have children, that oh yeah, like lentils and rice is a staple in South Asia, and the reason why they eat lentils is because it has protein in it. There's not, some people don't eat, animals or meat per se, and to get their like necessary protein, they eat lentils or so. And rice is something that's, available as a staple in South, let's say Southeast Asia, and that's why they eat those things the way they do. The same thing with, let's say, in Puerto Rico, they have rice and beans, which is somewhat similar to what they have in South Asia. It's just, made in a different way for everyone to enjoy. And that's what makes, all of us as a whole one group per se.
I love how, and that's often the case, is especially, and we have discussion in Suriname where we live, we have this discussion on what's the national food. And there is not one food that is considered a national food. Which brings me back, of course, to your story. So you migrated to the US at a relatively young age. And what kind of, to start off with food, but you could take other examples as well. What part of your heritage um, for you kept that warm feeling of Southeast Asia? What throughout your childhood, but also growing up, what are things that you kindly remember? Like, hey, this is something I'm proud of my heritage, which you kept when whatever came your way, you decide like, no, this is always for me to work to keep it myself.
Um, I would always say I always loved bangles. And I always loved glass bangles because every single one had like a unique, intricate design to it. And it was just different compared to, let's say whatever design little bracelets and stuff like other little girls wore in school. Like it was more unique and different. And until this day, I still love glass bangles. I mean, I'm not wearing it anymore at the moment, but it's that one thing that I actually did enjoy. I didn't enjoy putting the henna and stuff, but um, also I would say the the different winter shawls that were there that you could wear, with the different embroideries or so on it as a child, and even as an adult. It I don't know, it just makes you feel like as if you're back. And those are the two things that I think I still cherish. I mean, there's always food, but um food will always be there, but it's I think it's bangles and a shawl per se.
Okay, that's, yeah, that's interesting because those are really tiny things that people will notice. Like, oh wow, you're wearing bangles, and then of course you get to
Yeah,
talk about it.
it starts a conversation with people, and they'll ask like, oh, where did you get this from? Oh, what type of material is it, or so. I mean, or you can, give. There's always a story behind it. There's a story behind a shawl. The embroidery that was done might have been done by someone who doesn't have a lot of money, or they have a skill and they make these shawls to provide for their family. So you can provide that story to a stranger or someone, to better understand where people are in perspective to the world. um Not everyone in the world is able to go to a grocery store and get whatever they want, or not everyone is able to afford, let's say, the shawl that I might have been wearing. They might have made it, but they don't have, like, the necessary monetary amount for them to have one for themselves. So I want people to understand that there's more to the world than just where you live at, and to, expand your horizon based upon that.
So you already mentioned, telling stories to your children, involving them in activities like cooking, making stuff, handcrafts. That's one way to kind
Hmm.
of translate that, not just knowledge but skills and appreciation to the next generation. Uh, and as you grew up, child, adolescent, adult, like, has anything changed if you look back in the way you look at culture? Like, you already mentioned you didn't appreciate it back then when you were younger, but when did that shift happen, like that you started to appreciate it more and kind of decided, like, I really need to cherish this and transfer it to my to the younger generation?
I think I think my awakening came when I was in college, because when you go off to a university or a college, you're exposed to so many different cultures of people, because they're all coming together to learn in an epicenter per se. And because of all the different clubs that were in college, we had like a Middle Eastern club, we had an African club. What else did we have? We did have a Spanish club. So all these clubs came together and showcased their culture per se, or like specific dance, like you know um what was it? Not Macarena, I'm sorry. uh, but no, I mean, they showcased the way that they did things, and you were able to learn more from that. I mean, along with that, having like different history classes, like world history or so, where you get to see how culture has changed different regions. There might have been one culture there, and then thousands of years ago, and it's somehow um, progressed or evolved into something that has changed and made it better, or has evolved to include other cultures into its mix.
It's really interesting because, in a sense, of course, I was thinking like, okay, but what makes high school different from college or university? But indeed, it's like when you get to that age, and high school is still kind of, it's much more
It's
one
sheltered. I
dimensional.
think it's
It's
more
It's
sheltered,
it's
yeah.
sheltered.
sheltered, yeah. And indeed, when you start studying, you realize like, oh, and now there's really this need to also to bring together or talk with people who have similar interests, and then the opportunity arises as well. What for me was also interesting is, I don't know how it was for you in your childhood, so that's a question I want to ask. Is, for us, we have a lot of oral history, as in stories are being told and from one generation to the next. A lot of these things in Suriname, especially, they're not written down in books. But you mentioned, I think you mentioned on your website that you're, from a young age, you enjoyed reading books. And how did your passion for books start? And how did it gradually grow to where you're now?
Okay, so I have to credit my mom. I know my mom would always, other kids would go off to, let's say, Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, and ballet or so. My mom was not that type. She would take us to the library, and she would make us get tons and tons of books from there, or sit there and read a book. So I'd say I was exposed to books from a very young age, and the enjoyment into going into a world that is different than what you have currently, your situation, um, opens up so many different things for you as a child. I loved reading as a kid. I loved writing as a kid. I used to write poetry, or, little short stories or so as a kid. Um, but I really wanted to be a journalist instead. But the stars didn't align instead, and I instead did IT project management instead. But I still loved writing, and I really did want to like start writing a book or so. But I finally got to do it after I 4 kids later. Finally got to do writing and have a passion to help kids do what they can do best, which is be themselves. And children are the best at, keeping their imagination alive. The creativity is dependent on imagination, and it's kind of dying with kids. And I wish more and more books are created for kids to, dive into and be creative, beyond all this video gaming and, um, Roblox or Minecraft worlds that many of the kids are in at the moment.
But won't you say, or I see that as another way to place your, or like realize your imagination in a more vivid way. So I'm curious to know about you when you were reading these stories, fictional stories, about, what was it, more like fantasy like, or more grounded, like what kind of stories or worlds did you transport
I
yourself
used
into?
I used to, so the books I used to read were, I don't know, one of the authors was a very famous author, but he's dead now. But Isaac Asimov, I think his name was. He was very science fiction. He was ahead of his time. He used a lot of robots and technology in it. It had a lot of like ventures into space, planets and things of that nature. It was very much like I forgot what was that. There was a new show on Netflix with a robot and they were in space. I forgot the name of it. Um, I might remember.
Can't help you there. Haven't watched Netflix in a while,
No,
Chandu.
I
Oh,
know. I only know Ada Twist, the scientist, but I that's not the one you're mentioning.
oh, okay. So I used to read science fiction a lot more. I also used to read The Babysitter's Club. I don't even know if it's still around, but it was more of like a perspective of a girl per se, or girls, and it gave a highlight of what life would be like, not of other children per se, or of other girls per se, that maybe I didn't have in my current situation as a child. Those are the only two I could think of, but it was more science related, and I always did enjoy science as a kid. I used to read. My brother is also a physician, so when he was in medical school, I used to read his books just for the fun of it. But
Wow,
yeah,
that's a
it was it
tough
was.
one as well.
It's a
I
little
know
bit higher
it's
level, yeah.
it was very dorky, but it was very interesting and stuff to read how things work together. And we have a beautiful body that I think all of us need to learn more about and be in sync with.
No, it's interesting that you just mentioned that, like, because understanding yourself, your human psychology, kind of adds to this understanding and translation of how to transfer knowledge. Like, you mentioned journalism before. Like,
Yes.
how have these other non, I guess, storytelling fields added to your storytelling capabilities?
I think I guess I am not, how do I put it? I'm not that type of person who, like, there are some people, let's say, who will just watch CNN and will listen to like specific journalists per se for their outlook. I'm not that type. I'm the one who'll listen to CNN. I'll listen to Fox News. I'll listen to BBC. I will listen to Euro News. I listen to different perspectives because that's the only way to actually come to a concise decision per se, of understanding how your actions impact everyone around the world per se. And you can't keep yourself in a small little bubble per se of narrow-mindedness and what you think is correct. You have to understand everyone's um, pros and cons to understand how you can work together with them. And if that's what's the case with um, different perspectives in journalism, um, That's what it is. That's what I've been looking into.
I really, I I really, I'm interested in because I quickly want to dive into the book already. So he wonders why you
Mhm.
decided to make a book. Which first I have to ask the question: um, how much of it, how much of the fact that you made the personality a girl is has to do with the fact that you have four boys?
A
How much
lot.
did it factor in?
She is my imaginary little girl because I have four boys and they are, how do I put it? They're like a pack of little wolves. And to have a delicate little girl in reality would not be, I don't think she would be a little tomboy too. So if I can try to use my creative mind and to make a character that is somewhat, personifies, a strong, independent little girl who is very inquisitive, um, is what I want other kids to understand too. Not just girls, for boys too, that it's okay to be different, and it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to explore, because the more you explore, the more your brain is increasing its capacity. And that's what's needed right now is for creative minds to come together and you know make magical things or innovative things per se.
So, and then, of course, now back to the part where you said like you try to get all of the perspectives in. As a writer, how challenging was it for you to incorporate the concept of like, I want this book, no matter from what part of the world reads this book, to be able to relate to the characters and the situations mentioned. So how did you approach that?
Um, I try to make the other, besides Zoe, I try to make the other characters in my book to be diverse themselves. So I have a character in there who's from, Eastern Europe, from Poland. I have a character in there who's from Africa, from Nigeria. So basically, Zoe has, best friends that are not the same, let's say, sect or same culture as her. So she's exposed to a diverse background of other children in her class. And I want kids to understand that you too will be having something like that in your school. You won't have the same exact people like you surrounded by you. And for that reason, you have to learn more about everyone else, um, to know that this is the reality, that you'll be exposed to many different cultures and you'll be exposed to many different types of people, and you have to learn how to adapt to them and learn how to respect them um, as you grow older.
How important do you think, because it's a children's book, you work with an illustrator, like how important do you think the illustration, or how much do the illustrations add to the experience, the transporting them into that world? How much does that add in storytelling?
um, Quite a lot, because kids are very, not only kids, us adults, we're very like, we use more of our optical sense per se, and to as as you grow older, it's okay to have books where it's just, words per se. But for younger children, they use more of their eyes to understand what the story is. Yes, they can understand the story if you're very descriptive as an author, but a picture, like they say, a picture is 1,000 words, and that power of that picture is with the illustrator. My illustrator is also a very diverse person. She was all the way from Jakarta, Indonesia. So I had the way she had made my characters for like the first draft of it, she had made them look very, let's say, conservative, because Indonesia is a very conservative country. I had to give her a vision board to show her that, my characters cannot look like, Little House in the Prairies or something from like, the 1940s per se. So a vision board was very much needed with her. And it was an ongoing basis to ensure that the characters look like the way that children see themselves currently, and that they can relate to, let's say, Zoe or to Sam or to Mika in the story.
Okay, so they did all have smartphones on them as well.
Mm-hmm.
No, but um, looking back at the history for yourself, growing up in kind of different continents as well, what were things where you either struggled with or at a later age came to realization that it was not necessarily culture shock, but it was really different and things that people don't really think about when they are not familiar with experiencing different cultures.
I'd say some people were like, some people that were in, let's say, high school or grammar school with me, um, they were given the opportunity to go do, let's say, American things of like, going to prom, or um, homecoming, or going to like a weekend camping, or per se. um I wasn't able to do those things because I guess my parents and that generation felt that the perception of those things was not seen as a good thing. They thought that it made, the morality of, let's say, kids, um a little bit looser per se. And your child might get lost into the things of, like, let's say, drugs, or being surrounded by kids who might not be the same, might be not good kids per se, or try to like make you go to, the wrong rabbit hole per se. um yeah, in that sense, it made you at that time, it was just like, why aren't you letting me do this, and why can't I go to prom and stuff. And then, thinking like that, why is my culture like this? Why is it like not letting me do things like, a dance or something? It's just a dance. Or I'm, not gonna come back, bearing a child per se. I think that's the notion that some parents for that time frame, or in that culture, thought would happen per se.
I wanna, because I just looked at the cover again of the book, and yeah, I can see it very more modern, uh,
Yeah, exactly. It's
dressed up more modern, and with jackets, hoodies. I see the boy, and especially you mentioned, you described Zoe as kind of an inquisitive girl asking why, and curiosity is something that's very, I guess, untapped in children, because they see the world from a newborn's eye. Everything is like amazing and sparkly, and usually they just ask why.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
over time, as we grow up, a lot of adults kind of lose touch of that. Is there a particular reason why you decided to? I don't want to label it as an archetype, but kind of uh, shaped her personality into this uh, this curious type.
I guess because I have my second born is very curious. He asks tons and tons of questions. He is the person who will go onto YouTube and watch a video on, you know, Jupiter's moons, or will we ever get to Titan, or things of that nature. So I basically try to include that in, Zoe's character, for kids to be like, it's okay to be curious. And if you're curious, and an adult can't answer your question, there's there's a library for you. There's a book out there for you. Just don't hold off in trying to learn more about whatever your question might be. And no question is wrong, and no question is stupid. It just means you're thinking out loud, and you're trying to find out what's out there, because that is what life is about, is to find out more about, let's say, yourself, or anything else around you. And when you stop thinking about, things around you, you just become complicit, complicit, and basically doing routine things as an adult like a robot per se. And I really didn't want that for kids to have. I wanted them to be curious and, you know find out more things that they can, because with curiosity brings creativity, and with creativity brings innovation. And hey, you never know, one of these kids might create something that might help us in the future.
Yeah, and coming back to your fascination with science fiction when you were younger, a lot of sci-fi kind of is making its way into the world. Like the kids that read those books read it somewhere, imagined it,
Exactly,
and
exactly. Like,
created it.
I was watching, so my husband and I have been watching again. I don't know if you remember this show. It used to be on before. It was called Fringe. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Fringe,
Yes.
like Fringe. No, that
No.
doesn't ring a bell.
It's something like the X-Files, but they deal with, like, artificial intelligence. They deal with dark matter. It's more of a science fiction thing. But if you watch it, many of the things in there seem to be stuff that someone's creative mind create had so much creativity to make. So I don't think it's really dead for adults. It's it's just adults who have a passion for that are still creating it. So those directors, those writers are still creating it. So what we have to do as authors currently, we have to keep that drive for children to still be creative and come up with things that you know um might just become the future per se.
And welcome back, Shanluk. And the next thing I want to touch on is I think I read somewhere, was it your one of the bios? You also have an interest in filmmaking. So is how is that creative trajectory for you going? Like you have the written word, you have the illustration. Can we expect something in motion next?
Oh, no, not yet. Not yet. But I did work with a producer, and I did work with a narrator recently, to get Zoe Wonders Why on audio. So if anyone wanted to listen to her, she is available. Let's say on a car ride, you can listen with your child for 20 to 25 minutes. Zoe Wonders Why, on Audible. Um, and work from there. But let's see, it would be nice to have different stories or so, like on PBS Kids, or something of that sort, that kids can watch and have a conversation later after a show finishes. I know my kids watch one show. Um, I think it's called Bluey. But in that, they discuss about, like, a little bird or a budgie or something that, like, dies, or have a discussion on grief per se. What coping mechanisms are there, or someone's not playing properly with a kid or ignoring them, like, what can you do as a child? Can you go, even if they're not your friend, what can you do? You can go up to them and have a conversation with them, because you never know, you might be in that situation yourself. So let's see.
Oh, that would be very nice to see.
I
But
I think there's also
yeah.
mention that this is potentially part of a series. So just in retrospect to when you started the process of writing the book, was there already thought of saying like, hey, I want it in a series because I want to discuss different kind of topics?
Yes,
Or yes, so
yes, there
basically,
was, yes.
okay. So
uh,
basically, it's the first one of possibly more to come.
Yeah, so the next one that I have started writing, but if my kids give me a chance to write some more, would be to spend more time with your grandparents, and to learn things from them. Um, Grandparents hold a lot of information that their children didn't give them the time to discuss. But grandchildren love to be around grandparents because they spoil them rotten, and they're there to listen, and spew your grievances to them, and they'll listen to you. Um, Grandparents get very, very lonely because they live on their own. They don't have much things left to do. So um, kids are the best to just sit there and listen. And um, yeah, I'm hoping Zoe learned something from um, her grandparents, and she will face some obstacles and conflicts with them. But that's life, and I wanted to discuss other things that Zoe might be going through that other kids go through in life. I don't know if you noticed um, in the picture, Zoe doesn't have one eye color if you look in her eyes. If you look at the picture of the character, you'll see she doesn't have it.
All
So
right, she has brown and green eyes. Yeah, I just
yeah,
noticed.
so she has something different. So, the concept of she might face some bullying or something later on in life because of it. And kids need to learn how do you keep yourself balanced, and how do you not get affected by what others say, because um, the concept of bullying, I felt it when I was a kid, and I guess when I was a kid, I was not taught proper mechanisms on how to handle it. We were basically taught to, basically suppress it and just deal with it. And nowadays, kids are taught that no, you shouldn't. You have to go off to an adult and talk about it, or try to reduce the situation of what's happening, or try to understand where the feelings that a specific bully might be spewing onto you, what might be transpiring them to be like that. There might be something else in their environment that is causing them to be like that. Maybe their parents are not listening to them or not giving them the proper attention, or maybe they don't really have friends, and out of fear, they just, get angry at people. Like, maybe they would need like a friend who can actually listen that's different than they are. So let's see how things go.
It's a very beautiful process, and I don't know if you spoke when I got cut off. If you spoke with Diego about it, but what was the inspiration that you decided like, hey, not only am I interested in it, but I should pen this down as a book. I should write this concept out as a book. What was the main inspiration to start with the first one?
Okay. So um it was my firstborn kid. Um he actually did go to school, and um kids would ask him like, "Who are you? What are you?" And he didn't know anything. So he'd be like, I'm Adam, and that's it. And they would be like, "Oh my God, you're so like your hair is a certain way. Like, why is your hair so spiky?" So my kid has spiky hair, and his hair stays up. It's straw-like, and his skin tone is a little bit different than everyone else's. And they would be like, "Oh my God, you're different. How come you're not so brown? Like, you say you're from South Asia. Why aren't you so like brown and dark and stuff?" And he's like, "I don't know. And your hair is like golden brown color. Like, what are you?" So, my kid would come to me and be like, "I'm getting made fun of and stuff. Like, what did you do? Like, is this what I'm supposed to be like?" So, I kind of listened to his thing. And then when he went to the library, he would notice there would be no books for him. There would be all like books that were, you know, like the Hardy Boys, or Percy Jackson, or something of that sort type of characters. But he didn't see himself in the characters. He couldn't really relate to it. So I thought, what, I really think we need to find books. I really think we need to make books that kids can relate to, and it has to be off topic, not something like, talking about, diversity of your hair and being proud of that. That's fine. There's plenty of books on that. Or, being proud of your hair color, or, your skin tone per se. I wanted it to be more than a little bit more deeper than that, and be proud of, your culture, or be proud of your heritage and learn more about that per se. And if I could do that with my child to, explore that, it would be great if other kids could explore it too. I know my kid said, my eldest Adam said that he wanted to check out when he's older. He wants to either move to like Boston, Massachusetts, or to Tokyo, Japan. And the only reason he wants Tokyo, Japan is because he wants to learn more about samurais or to learn more about ninjas or so. So, that inquisitive mind is what is needed for kids to learn about other people's cultures. Um, like my kid wants to learn about Japanese cultures, or through books, like from reading Percy Jackson, he's interested in Roman architecture or Greek mythology. Um, Maybe, other kids would be interested in that too, and be the next generation of architects in creating architecture that's, not Lego block like, or, the structures that are out there right now. If you look at previous history of architecture per se, they were amazing wonders, and the creativity was amazing. And I think that needs to be brought back through, you know, the children of current time.
I have one final question from my end. In the process of writing and how to write, because you just mentioned you try to do it off topic, not in a direct way, in a way that they can, transport themselves into the world or kind of relate to it. How do you add layers to that messaging in a simplified way that adds that deeper meaning? How have you developed that, I guess, skill, or like, yeah, how do you add messages in an indirect way but still hit?
I think like maybe if you have like if you're writing a storyline per se and you put a conflict in your story plot, maybe put little subtle messages into it, like with Zoe, um, she was acting up in class, and because she didn't eat the night before because she was stressed out about whatever project she was supposed to present on. I kind of put it a layer in there that she started acting out in class, or her tummy was rumbling per se. Um, the teacher, in sense, gives her a note, and the note is something that she has to take home. So kids can relate to, let's say, the note that, hey, you know what, sometimes I do act up and I do get notes to take home. So when I'm doing these book readings, I do ask kids, like, okay, have you ever felt like stressed out that you didn't want to eat the night before? Or, how did you feel when, things weren't going your way? Like, well, yeah, sometimes I didn't want to eat, or maybe I felt like I wanted to eat more. Like, how did that make you feel? So little things like that you could put into a story or whatever you're writing to get a message across that, sometimes it's better to talk about what your feelings are than to just, keep it inside. I did put gentle parenting in my book. I wish I followed gentle parenting, but I really don't. Um, her mom doesn't like yell or scream at her that she got a note from school. Her mom basically asks, "What's your side of the story? This is what the teacher is saying. I want to understand what transpired with your side of and your point of view of what things happen, and then come to a conclusion." Her mom didn't yell at her. Her mom basically said that, sometimes it's better for us to, calm down a little and let everyone do what they need to, and then, give your opinion or say per se. Um, but yeah, a lot of that, I think that a little trinkets of messages in there for parents to, um, don't get mad at your child, and try to understand where they are coming from. We all have bad days as adults. Kids have them too. And we really need to understand sometimes kids don't want to do things, or sometimes not go to school per se. Just like us adults sometimes don't want to go to work.
So I quickly want to jump into that one as my final question as well. Because like you mentioned, don't yell at your kids, but I think that also comes from a certain stress factor. I mean, as a parent, if you're stressed out and your kid doesn't act accordingly in a moment of, yeah, tension for yourself, of course it gets projected. So we can
Yeah.
project it to anybody, but in in some cases it get projected to your children. So what advice would you give, like, parents that get to deal with these questions at a inappropriate time, so they're not at that moment ready to answer a question about culture or diversity? What would we give advice as advice
I
to them?
I would say you should say to your kid that, that's a really good question. Mommy or daddy doesn't really know the answer for it. I'm gonna go do my research and find out for you. And, I'll get back to you by whatever. To be like, you know what, we'll discuss this in like what, 3 days time, or we'll discuss it over the weekend or something. And be like, okay, you know what, let's work together on it. Maybe we can go to the library and find something. Or how about you find something on YouTube? Maybe there's something on Netflix that you can find on it, and you and I can watch something together on it. That way you have a bonding experience with your kid, and your kid understands that, what, mommy or daddy or whomever the adult caretaker doesn't know everything, and they too are still growing and learning. So maybe I too should learn to, like, look around me and try to be curious and try to figure things out together, per se. I sometimes do that with my child too. My second born, sometimes he asks like questions about, planets, and what would what would happen if we went to Jupiter and all these other things. And I'm just like, well, I really don't know much about it. Maybe you can search for it too. So, you know, we can see what happens that way.
Yeah, because we're not all knowing either, and
Yeah,
that's
we're not. But
okay.
you know what? But for some reason, kids think that their parents know everything, and sometimes we don't. And sometimes that when we yell at our kids, it might be that, we didn't sleep well last night, or we didn't have lunch or something. And because of that, we don't really know how to control our emotions, and we basically have to showcase it to our kids that, like, sometimes mommies and daddies can't control their emotions either, and that's okay. As an adult, you can basically say, I'm sorry if I yelled. If you did yell at your kid, you could say, I'm sorry I yelled at you, mommy or daddy didn't know how to control my emotions at the moment, and I had, XYZ or something on my mind, but I'm sorry about that. So I mean, that teaches your child that, what, my mom or dad made a mistake, and they apologized for it. And it's a skill that, as for a child to understand. As an adult, we all make mistakes, and there's a reason for us to apologize also for it, and not keep everything like, I'm correct and that's about it.
It's really interesting. I would love to continue talking. We've passed the hour mark already. So,
Oh,
Nadia,
yeah.
we have to ask you to plug your book. So, for people interested, want to know more about Suino, what, how can they, purchase the book? Where can they find the book? If they're interested, where can they find more about it?
Sure. So, if they wanted to purchase a book, it's available on Amazon. The paperback, hardcover, ebook is available on there.
So, if
Along
people
with
just sorry, if people search, so he knows why, they will find the book
Zoe Wonders
immediately,
Why.
right?
Zoe
Okay.
Wonders Why.
Wonders why. Sorry. So he wonders why. My
Yes,
apologies.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. They'll find it there. They can also check me out on Instagram. My handle is Zoe Wonders Why. You can also check me out on my website, which is zoewonderswhy.com. But I'm more active on my Instagram page. And they can see all the wonderful different libraries that I've been going to. My kids love to come along with me. Um, they're tired of the story per se, because they've heard it so many times. But they love the experience of, selling the book, or learning that, it's like a small business to them, that they learn how to, deal with cash, deal with people, and, learn a little bit of math along the way, that, this is how you're supposed to, you know be creative and hustle per se.
That's really cool to hear. To
Yeah.
that added layer of learning, not just the book, but kind of involving them in the whole process. That's really wonderful to hear.
Thank you,
Nadia,
Nadia.
thank you for coming us and sharing your story, and uh, also about sharing about your heritage and culture, and kind of the importance of transferring this to the younger generation as well, so it doesn't get lost. With that being said, this episode will, of course, be released on our website in a few weeks' time. I think before the end of the year, we'll release the December batch of episodes. And if you haven't already, if you have kids, check out Nadia's book, So We Wonders Why. Sean Luke, any final thoughts before you close it off?
Yes, Nadia, we want to thank you again for coming on to Social Confoes. It was a pleasure having you, and we love to learn more about the next segment, the next book, which will be about Zoe and her grandparents. We want to thank you for being our guest. We want to thank everybody who tuned in. As always, we will be back here next week. See you. Bye bye.
Bye, guys.